Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. Mayor-elect Lori Lightfoot outlines her top priorities, including stemming street violence as the weather warms.
I worry about our children growing up with so much trauma and fear. I worry about that a lot. It keeps me up at night. The other issue, big issue, clearly is also municipal finance. We have to have a future in the city where we're not shackled by the burdens of bad decisions and mistakes that were made, particularly around pensions. But we've got to make sure that we hold true to the promise to our pensioners who make up a huge percentage of the middle class in our city.
In an interview this morning with Amanda Vinicky, Lightfoot says the city's fiscal challenges are even worse than previously reported.
What we want to see in government is something that works for the people, not for the large donors and corporations who have their agenda.
Chicago City Council will see quite a few new faces, including a handful of Democratic socialists. How will the newly elected aldermen reshape the city?
We have to make sure that justice is being followed all the time.
We're going to stand with Kim Foxx. She has made good on her promises.
Dueling demonstrations over Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx and her office's handling of the Jussie Smollett case. And in sports.
And Minter does have his first strikeout, and the Braves have swept the Cubs.
The Cubs lose their fifth game in a row, falling 9-4 to the Atlanta Braves. Meanwhile, the 2-3 White Sox postponed their home opener until today because of rainy weather. And Lori Lightfoot's going to throw out the first pitch at that Sox home opener. So joining us right now is Mary Ann Ahern of NBC5 Chicago, also Bill Ruthhart of the Chicago Tribune, Leah Hope of ABC7 Chicago, and Mike Mulligan of 670 AM. The score, let's get right to it, Mary Ann. 74-26 drubbing for Lori Lightfoot. She's been a national darling all weekend because of this historic election. How long does this honeymoon last?
It lasts for a while. Give her a few weeks, but I would say, she's not even sworn in yet. May 20th, she'll be sworn in. Maybe May 21st, the honeymoon is over. But she's going to enjoy a period right now of folks saying, wow, look what happened. Not only did she win all 50 wards, national interviews, all of that. Heading to Springfield, also says she wants to go to Washington, D.C., calls from the president, and not just the president, but Ivanka calling.
Oh, really? What did Ivanka tell her?
Well, who does run the place? So I guess Ivanka talked about child care and the issues that she cares about. So, yes, she's going to have, I don't think for long, but she's going to have a time that folks are going to say, wow, isn't this interesting?
Bill Ruthhart, she announced the transition team. Who's on it, and what does that say about what her administration is going to look like?
Well, it's a lot of the same people that were really kind of advising her campaign. Manny Perez, who's her campaign manager and an ally of Chuy Garcia. I think what's interesting here, though, is the big problems and issues she's going to have to tackle as soon as she gets in office. A police contract, a contract with teachers, those are all very difficult things. Budget deficit. She has come up with more than $500 million for her budget in October. So these are really difficult decisions she's going to have to make in a hurry, and that's when the honeymoon gets a little bumpy.
Leah Hope, you covered Tony Preckwinkle on Tuesday. What happens with Preckwinkle now?
Well, it was interesting that evening because all of us have been at election nights where you're not with the winner, and usually the room clears out really quickly. But what was interesting is that people kind of hung around, and what we heard from her and her surrogates, that even though it wasn't the outcome they wanted, that this was still a victory for the people of Cook County, because we still have an African-American woman as a Cook County board president. We have an African-American woman as the head of the mayor-elect of the city of Chicago. So it was interesting to see how people read it. So what it means for Tony Preckwinkle, she has had a career as a public servant, as an alderman for 5 terms, and now entering her 3rd term as Cook County Board President. So she said she will continue to do that. And what we heard Rainbow Push when Reverend Jesse Jackson brought them both together is that she will continue to do what she has always done despite the outcome of this election.
Mike Mulligan, when you see the margin here, 74-26, does that tell you that there's a mandate in Chicago that the machine is dead?
Yeah, I mean, I think the machine is dead, to be brutally honest about it. I don't know that this is a mandate. I'm not sure that everyone voted. It was, 34% of the people voted. So I think she took advantage of a really nice situation, and she is obviously generating a lot of interest nationally and a lot of people. She's going to become a darling in the Democratic Party. Maybe she will end up achieving all that Rahm had in mind when he became the mayor of Chicago.
Yeah, I wonder if how Rahm is reacting to all the national exposure that Lightfoot is getting, because Rahm loves his national exposure.
He does. And interestingly, when we spoke, so Lightfoot has been doing her one-on-one interviews yesterday and today, and I asked her, when was the last time that you had spoken with Mayor Emanuel before Wednesday when they had this meeting post-election? 20 months. It had been 20 months since they had spoken, and that was when she was, as she put it, whistled in to talk about her appointment on the police board. He put her back on the police board, didn't really want to do it, but because there was so much, why not? She's, she should be on it. Why are you taking her off? And then never spoke to her again. Is
there a sense that this is the Frankenstein Rahm Emanuel created? I mean, he gave her the opportunity to head the police board, the police reform task force, with the thought that she would maybe give him a little political cover, and then she kind of turned on him.
It was funny. I was talking with Congressman Chuy Garcia the weekend before the campaign was over. He endorsed Lightfoot, and he referred to her as perhaps Rahm Emanuel's biggest regret, because literally Emanuel provided the platform for which Lightfoot, rose publicly and became visible, and ultimately had the platform to run for mayor. Now, of course, when you appointed the police board in 2015, that was before the Laquan McDonald situation, which has now dominated the city's discourse and policing becoming a major issue. And then she caught lightning in a bottle with the Ed Burke situation, which really separated her from the rest of the field. She was a lone voice kind of railing against all these establishment candidates who had ties to Burke.
Leah, Hope, you mentioned this unity breakfast with Reverend Jackson. Did you sense a warmth and fuzziness between the two candidates, or just kind of a begrudging, all right, we're going to work together?
Well, it's hard to say what's always going on behind the scenes, but we have certainly seen in other elections where candidates who have fought against each other during difficult campaigns and not even wanted to be in the same room. So that they were in the same room does mean something. And they also both understand the significance of this election. It's interesting. You mentioned, Bill, the Burke thing, because people are still wondering, wow, why was it such a landslide? And I've been talking to several folks to get their opinions. People were still hung up on the soda tax. Tony Preckwinkle, they didn't want their soda tax. And also that Preckwinkle she eased off of it, but early on she said that she was going to fire Superintendent Eddie Johnson. And with all that is going on with violence, and now we're seeing some of the violence numbers going down, the rank and file not looking for someone to come in from the outside, as we've seen before. We're not eager to see the command change. So it was several things that obviously helped Lightfoot.
Missteps by the Preckwinkle campaign. It seems like, Mike Mulligan, do you anticipate a return to council wars now that longtime aldermen like Pat O'Connor are gone and Ed Burke has his power severely diminished?
I think Ed Burke's power diminished is a huge story here and part of the underlying factor to all this, and I think it may affect that. It's going to be very curious to see what happens to the long and storied tradition of patronage, and if there are vacuums created, if people are moving into this sort of thing, if there's going to be control sort of taken over that in any way. So that's going to determine where the battles are fought.
Well, people have fought against patronage in this cycle, but you can argue that, the system worked, things got done, even though it seemed kind of unseemly. Mary Ann, tell us about some of the new council members that are going to take their seats.
Well, I mean, first of all, the Andre Vasquez that has run against Pat O'Connor, even the other people on the ballot, 2 women, were teachers, social worker, I believe, and they thought they were going to be the front runners to oppose O'Connor. So that Andre Vasquez was kind of like, what?
Former rapper.
Yeah, who is that? But when O'Connor didn't even get, I think, in the 30s and on the first round, it was evident that he was not going to do well. As well, we have folks in the 20th, a new alderman in the 20th ward, which was Willie Cochran, and before Willie Cochran, how many have gone to jail? 3?
Troutman, Cochran.
Yeah, and she's quite interesting in saying, I'm not going to wear an orange jumpsuit. I don't plan on going to jail. So
she said, I don't look good in orange.
That was it. Yeah. And we're still waiting, of course, on whether Deb Mell, whether Leslie Hairston, And who's the third? There's three that we're still waiting. The Kappelman.
Oh, Kappelman in the
Yes.
46th
so
Ward.
we've got three that we still don't know for sure where they're going to end up.
Bill Ruthhart, 1/10 of city council now will be made up of so-called Democratic Socialists. How's that going to work in an era where the city has enormous budget pressures?
Well, I think you have like kind of three different ways of looking at this. You have the Democrat Socialists to the far left, who there was only basically one before this election, Carlos Ramirez Rosa. Then you have the kind of traditional progressives and the Progressive Caucus, and then you have your more old guard, more conservative aldermen. So they're all going to have to figure out, and take tough votes on raising taxes and cutting spending to deal with the budget issue. Some of the progressives, it's interesting, who are kind of the left before the socialists are coming in, are saying these socialist guys don't really understand how the system works, and they have a lot to learn on governing. So it'll be interesting to watch.
They're more to the left of the progressives, who are more to the left of people that they defeated. It just seems to keep moving in one direction. Anyone know who will emerge as kind of like a floor leader, someone who can help get Lightfoot's agenda through city council?
Scott Waguespack has got to be one of the first go-tos. I mean, he had endorsed her, one of the first aldermen in the beginning to endorse her, but I do think he might have some pushback from some of those traditionalists, as you have talked about. He has been a progressive. There's going to be others that are like, wait, hold on, Waguespack, we want a voice as well. Alderman Anthony Beale had endorsed her early on. He's going to be looking for a leadership role. There was also a big crowd that went with Preckwinkle. So, it is sort of that, taking names, places. We're going to see. When you win, you get to put your team together, and you get to reward those who supported you. So I think Lightfoot is going to do that. You would only be smart to.
There's two others to watch. Tom Tunney did some fundraising for the mayor-elect, and downtown alderman Brendan Riley also came around, and that's somebody who knows how the system works, knows how to kind of get votes together. He might be somebody to watch,
and they've
too.
been there a while compared to some of the newer ones.
Well, and while people are picking their alliances, and figuring out where they land, and we have these three wards where we still don't know who the alderman is, the citizens of Chicago are wondering about the potholes and are wondering about the stuff going on in their garbage pickup and all of the issues that are happening in Chicago neighborhoods. It seems like a lot of things have been on hold, waiting to see who the mayor was going to be, and then waiting to see who my alderman is going to be. And some folks are still waiting. So now this is just kind of prolonging things, I think, as we get into who is going to be aligned with truly Lightfoot, who is going to hold true to their campaign promises.
Right.
In the meantime, we're in spring. We're moving into summer, and
You're
people
right.
are worried about their streets and their sidewalks.
These discussions are meant for the high-minded boardrooms and TV studios, but people want to know, our streets are horrible right now because of this winter. Maybe that should be Lightfoot's number one priority.
And going into summer, while we may see some statistics of violence coming down, the reality is Chicago still has a violence problem. So what does this mean moving forward? While people are angling politically, people want to know, are their kids going to be safe? Are they going to be safe walking to and from school, going out and taking advantage of all that Chicago has to offer?
What do you think about the Emanuel-Lightfoot relationship? You touched on this. They say they're going to work together. What's Rahm's move over the next month?
Well, he has promised a seamless transition. I don't think they're going to take the W's off the typewriter like they did at the White House, The L's, yeah. Right, they're not going to do that. But it's going to be, he also, according to Lightfoot in my interview with her, she said he did talk about there's one mayor at a time. And I was like, that's interesting. And she didn't do a total eye roll, but she did do kind of a, He did tell me that. He did say there's one mayor at a time. And she did, he is correct. There is one. But he wanted to make it clear, listen, I'm still here till May 20th at 11 a.m. or noon or whatever it is. So just hold your horse till I get the...
I do think Emanuel's been through enough transitions, both at the White House and at City Hall, that he's going to play this by the book in terms of he doesn't want to get blamed for something falling through the cracks, in this transition.
Well, it was funny how staged that little meeting was for the cameras. He popped out of the room just as she popped out of the elevator, and it was just perfect timing. I guess by coincidence. Let's move into non-election local news. Suburban police chiefs in Chicago's police union declare they have no confidence in Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx. The Illinois House passes a bill that would create an elected school board for Chicago public schools, and the FBI says a teenager found wandering in Kentucky is not in Aurora Aurora boy missing since 2011. Leah Hope, Kim Foxx just continues to get the heat. Is she going to make it through her entire term?
Yeah, I think she's going to make it through her whole term, but it's probably not going to be easy for her. I mean, the reality is you have this fallout from Smollett, but what I see, and we saw from those protests on Monday, that immense frustration with our criminal justice system. No one's happy with it, and she has become the scapegoat for it, no matter where you are. We saw, I guess it was more than dueling protests. It was more than 2 protests. The reality is there were several folks
well, and
out
there was kind of like a racial element to it, right? I mean, you were talking about how there was like a white nationalist group in there with the FOP. Is a lot of this opposition to Foxx, I mean, is there a racial aspect to this?
You know, the optics of it are real. When we saw the FOP planning this protest on Monday against Kim Foxx, they said it was specifically about the Smollett case and about other cases that she hasn't gone through with charges. Those who were protesting, it was mainly white men. And then we saw in the subsequent days, we saw suburban police chiefs, also white men, very critical of Kim Foxx and saying that they have no confidence of her. So, I mean, I think you can read into that what you like, and the optics of it are real. We have an African-American woman as the state's attorney making these decisions, and this is kind of the element that it brought out, that protest on Monday. There were people passing out MAGA hats, and while the FOP president, Kevin Graham, said, this is not about politics, this is not about anything else, this is just about, we're concerned about Kim Foxx, that can't be ignored. And what was very interesting is, as I literally was in between people arguing on both sides, you know, a police officer and activists. There were also anti-police activists. There was a lot going on, but they were both just venting about how frustrated they were with on the police officer's side. They're working hard to solve these cases. The ones that they do, what happens when they actually get these cases to the state's attorney's office? And then on the other side, in the community, you know, there is still that distrust of, and cases that they feel they're not getting the respect on in the community.
Mary Ann,
the timing of all this was just so interesting as well, because in the middle of the mayor's race, and her mentor, Toni Preckwinkle.
Yes.
So they seemed to be doing this big distance of each other. Preckwinkle kept saying, I haven't spoken to her. I want to hear what went on. Why did she make this decision? But it just was sort of one more, you know, sort of difficult situation for Preckwinkle to face after many during her campaign. And so you wonder, was this a rookie mistake of a new, you know, state's attorney? You know, people still cannot figure the whole thing out.
Did the case fall apart? I mean, Mike Mulligan, what's your take on what happened?
The case is about race, right? I mean, the case is about, you know, accusing 2 guys in MAGA hats who apparently were Nigerian, attacking him, and didn't he have a noose around his neck? I mean, this couldn't be more about race. And what's fascinating is to watch the reaction falling into the same categories. It's just really weird. I didn't know that they were handing out MAGA hats, but that detail from the alleged attack, is what made it a national story. And you know, frankly, just as a person who's lived here my whole life, Chicago got a black eye over this whole thing. We got beaten up and this thing's going on. It was like the coldest day of the year. That story made no sense to me from day one. And I had a friend of mine who's a guy I know through football kept sending me these texts, and I was like, yeah, I agree with you. Like, I didn't know that it was some giant conservative story about made up. I mean, the whole thing, I didn't because the story just seems so weird.
It certainly is blown up in conservative media circles because of the hoax element.
You know, and from the beginning, we all had so many questions from when it was reported in January. How, all of us who live here and cover these issues, we know there's problems. We know there's racial problems in Chicago, but really, how could this happen?
Not at that time.
Not at that weather.
Yeah.
I mean,
the reality of weather. But we have had so many questions about this story here locally and nationally, internationally, actually. Then when the charges were dropped, we had even more questions.
Well, and when the case was sealed up, do we expect that the seal will be lifted on this case and we'll get more answers?
I mean, there's media organizations
Suing right now.
We'll see. I mean, I think, you know, it became a political issue for sure. You had Al Sharpton come to town to defend Kim Foxx. They're certainly making it about race, and this is about a black woman finally having the power to make prosecutorial decisions. So, you know, I think politically, Foxx is going to have a race, you know, for re-election for sure, probably multiple challengers, and we'll have to see how it all
We wonder if Tony
plays out.
Preckwinkle will abandon her. I have to quickly get to this elected school board bill that passed. It got held up in the Senate last time. Is it going to pass the Senate this time?
Well, and Lightfoot's heading to Springfield this week. She is not so sure she likes the House version of this so far. I think she feels it's unwieldy, too many members.
Yeah, she opposed it. 20 members on this thing. She wants fewer members. She also wants some requirements to actually be on the school board. She'd like to have them from local school councils, so perhaps they'll actually be parents instead of politicians.
All right, another national story this week, Leah. Timothy Pitzen, the young kid that disappeared from Aurora. Why is this story getting such national headlines that we had someone falsely claim to be Timothy Pitzen?
It was such a bizarre story initially. You know, the mother killed herself and then left a note saying that her son would not be found, but he would be cared for. So this story really lingered, wondering where this child was, his surviving family, wondering where he was and trying to find him for years. So, you know, all of us have been watching this story, and we want a happy ending. We want to see this child found. We want to see him be okay somehow. So when this young man claimed to be this person with details, I mean, he had details that were unusual. This was difficult to cover for media, honestly, because you have to tread lightly on the reality that this family, their hopes have been brought up so many times whenever there's a lead. So, so I know my colleagues who were out there tread very lightly with them, and then of course it turned out not to be him. So you saw, and you really could feel just the sadness and the disappointment, the grief from the family, having to relive this all over again, knowing that this wasn't their beloved Timothy, and that unfortunately they still don't know where he is.
Such a sad story. Well, we have to move on now to sports. The Cubs are on a 5-game losing streak after the bullpen implodes in Atlanta. The White Sox postponed Thursday's home opener, but they opened today at whatever the stadium is called. And the Blackhawks missed the playoffs again. Mike Mulligan, is there any quick fix this season to these pitching woes? Because Cubs season's going off the rails really quickly.
The Cubs season has gone off the rails, but we're talking about 1% of the season.
Yeah.
It is very strange to see a 5-game losing streak from a team that a lot of people thought, certainly around here, believe that they can win the division and they should have done better. They won 95 games last year. So it is, part of the problem is bullpens from one year to the next are not very predictable. And they did not make a lot of change. And so when you don't reinvest and turn things up around and all that, then you have this bizarre C.J. Edwards story where the guy develops a new pitch. He's going to work at, they're going to somehow keep him over the rubber longer, and he's going to follow Jensen and tap his foot. And it's 1 week into the season, it's deemed an illegal pitch, and he can't use it. So his whole off season is wasted effectively. Bizarre little things like that all gang up, and now you end up with 3 or 4 games where your bullpen blows up.
Well, and you talk about that they didn't make any changes, but didn't Ricketts kind of tighten the screws on spending money because they had spent so much on Yu Darvish the year before?
Well, it was Yu Darvish, Brandon Morrow, and of course Tyler Chatwood were the 3 big expenditures. And then because of Yu's injury, they had to go out and get Cole Hamels. So everyone forgets Cole Hamels. That's another $30 million. The Cubs believe they have spent more than enough money. It is one of those years, though, where you had guys available. Craig Kimbrell is still available. This is a guy on a trajectory to be a Hall of Fame reliever, and he is still out there because people don't want to give big money, and he's holding out for the big money contract. So at some point, he'll probably sign a 1-year deal or something. But they need to get this sorted out, and maybe it takes them a month. Joe's trying to preach patience. He is, of course, in a lame duck year. He calls it his free agent year, but they didn't give him a contract extension. The feeling is that Joe could be the person that is victimized here. It's hard to make the right decision when every decision you make is wrong because of the group you're left with. So I feel a lot of sympathy for his plight.
All right, let's talk about the White Sox, 2-3. What's their ceiling this year? I mean, is this a year where they could kind of make a leap?
You know, what's good is they gave Eloy Jimenez a long-term extension, so they don't have to waste another month before they bring him up. He's already up, and you're going to see some good things from him. Yohan Moncada was the key to the Chris Sale trade. He started the season very strong. So some of the young guys are already here. All we're talking about with them is the rebuild and where they've turned a little bit of a corner with the rebuild. And their starting pitching looks pretty good. They have some bullpen issues too. But I think really if you get to, if you don't lose 100 games, if you can get to 80 wins somehow, that would be an unbelievable year for the White Sox. And it's just, unfortunately, they're just not there yet. It's going to be next year when you see the bigger push. But who knows? Sometimes good things happen and unexpected things happen. God knows the Cubs arrived early.
All right, well, good things happened on this panel, but we're out of time. Mary Ann Ahern, Bill Ruthhart, Leah Hope, Mike Mulligan, thank you all for being here, and we'll continue this conversation online in our Web Extra video, and you can visit our website to see our full interview with Mayor-elect Lori Lightfoot. We'll see you on the next edition of The Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. See you next week. So what about the Blackhawks?
Oh, yeah, we didn't get to the Blackhawks.
Yeah, it's a pity what happened with the Blackhawks. I mean, obviously they fired Joel. The problem with the Blackhawks is they've just wasted two of the best years from two of their stars who are aging quickly, right? Now they're getting beyond 30. It's trying to figure out what the defense is going to look like in the goalie situation. Is this new coach going to come back? He looks really good to me. He fixed the problem.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, proud sponsors of the 25th Annual Clifford Symposium on Tort Law and Social Policy, held at DePaul University College of Law, April 25th and 26th.